Get ready to live fearlessly free with Heather Bunch.
Unsure to take that immediate action towards your goal because that journey felt daunting? Are you struggling to maintain that momentum on your projects and your goals, especially when progress seems to slow down and that destination feels like a galaxy far, far away? Anyone besides me lose a little momentum along the way? It's okay. I got you covered, my friend. Do you find it challenging to trust your intuition and those godly divine nudges, especially when you can't see the whole picture? Welcome to Live Fearlessly Free podcast. I'm your courageous coach, Heather Bunch, and I am here to help you, Christian women entrepreneurs, go from feeling stuck, not enough, and fearful to focused and confident and courageously growing yourself so you can grow your business. I want to thank you for joining me on this final episode of Hidden Heroes of Christmas. And so far, we have learned how to conquer fear with courageous faith. And we learned that from the shepherds. We also stepped into courageous trust when we stepped into the shoes of Joseph and all that he had to do and to listen and to trust God with the plan that God had, even though it was uncertain and it didn't make sense at times. Now, if you missed those episodes, you can check them out. It was episode 335 and 336. Now, today we're going to finish off this series with courageous perseverance. Woo! And we're learning that from the wise men. So today is going to be for you if you are ready to discover how to take bold, immediate action so you can kickstart your journey in 2025 and actually reach your destination, just like the wise men did. Today's also going to be for you if you're ready to learn how to sustain perseverance over the long haul so you can maintain that momentum and stay in faith, even when that path is long and it feels arduous. We've got you covered, my friend. And today is also going to be for you if you are ready to understand the power of listening to that inner guidance, the Father who's telling you where to go and where to turn so that you can be adaptable and enhance your ability to align yourself with his plan so you can actually navigate this efficiently. Today is your day, my friend. Now, what I love about the wise men is there's so much that we can actually learn from them. So let's start with reading the passage about the wise men. And you're going to find this in Matthew 2. It's going to be verses 1 through 12. I'm going to read it in the New American Standard Version. It says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi, or wise men, sometimes they're called the three kings, but Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him.' And when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And they gathered together all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, and he inquired of them, where was the Messiah to be born? And they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what has been written by the prophets. And you, Bethlehem, land of Judea, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah, for from you will come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people, Israel." And isn't that Jesus? He is our great shepherd caring for us. So it goes on to say, then Herod secretly called for the Magi. I found it interesting he didn't do this in front of the chief priests, don't you? And determined from them the exact time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go, search carefully for the child, and when you have found him, report to me, for I too may come and worship him. Do you think that's really what Herod wanted? Now, after hearing the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it came to stop over the place where the child was to be found. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And after they came into the house, they saw the child and his mother Mary. They fell down and worshipped him. And they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, I'm going to get into that in a little bit because each of those gifts actually has special meaning. And after being warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, maybe Herod didn't have, pure motives on that. The Magi left for their own country by another way. Now, right after this is the moment when we read about Joseph hearing from God in a dream, hey, beat feet and get to Egypt. So wise men leave, they go by a different way, they don't go to Herod. And then Joseph is warned, hey, you got to get out of Dodge. And so he does. Now, what I want to do is I want to break down these 3 lessons in courageous perseverance. So the wise men, when you think about this, the first thing we learn from them is courageous perseverance takes immediate action. Immediate action. Isn't that crazy? So all 3 people that we have seen so far, the shepherds, Joseph, and the wise men or the Magi, have had to take immediate action. They learned something, they were told something, and boom, they did it. Verse 1 and 2, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, where is he who was born of the kings? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. They saw the star and they packed up and got on the road to go find Jesus. So just like the shepherds had courageous faith and Joseph had courageous trust, they all immediately took action, and that was the key component of both the faith, trust, and perseverance. When God has a plan for our lives, and he does, when he tells us things, we got to take immediate action. We're about to go into, this is Christmas Eve if you're listening to this on the day it comes out. We're about to come into a new year. And this year will not look any different from last year if you do not take immediate action. How many of us are going to sit here and set goals? And I'm going to do that myself. I've already been working on some, and I got a new planner that came yesterday. I'm going to test out. I love me some planners, and I love planning, and I love envisioning. But if I don't ever actually do the goals, they don't do me any good. I have got to take immediate action. This journey is a long journey. And you have got to keep taking the steps in order to actually get to where you want to go. Now that leads me into the next lesson, and that's lesson 2. Courageous perseverance keeps going and going and going. It's like the Energizer Bunny. Y'all remember the Energizer Bunny? Do you remember the Energizer Bunny? He keeps going and going and going, and it was this battery they'd put into a rabbit, and he just had his little drums, and he would just beating and a banging, and he just kept going and going and going and going and going. That is what courageous perseverance does. Verse 1 says, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea in the days of King Herod, behold, the Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem. So they started in the east and they made it to Jerusalem. Now, scholars, they go back and forth. They don't really know exactly how long this journey takes them. It could be anywhere from several months to a couple of years. And they base that off because they don't know the exact location. They just know it was in the east. So they base it off distance and the travel methods. Think about the caravan. They're using camels, they're using donkeys, they're walking, they're laden with treasures. They've got to haul all the food with them. Like, it's going to take a while. It would be an entourage, but it just wasn't 3 people. We 3 kings of Orient are. Like, it was not just 3 people going along, but it was a group of people that were caravanning, and it took a long time. So they're packing everything. It was like when I was a kid, we used to go backpacking. And when I say backpacking, I don't mean we pulled up the car and then popped out a tent and then had our picnic tables. I mean, everything we ate was packed on our backs, and we hauled it in to the middle of nowhere, and we'd cook our food over an open fire. They'd go fish and they'd cook, and we'd have like this, we had these other camp foods that were like dehydrated stuff. Felt like, we were in NASA, rehydrating our food, but we had to haul everything we needed, everything from toilet paper to, I always took my pillow, but that was just me because, really, I don't even like backpacking anymore. I would love to do some glamping, and I'd be all for that. But that is the type of method that they had to do. You also have to look at Herod's decree. Herod decreed, after he found out that the Magi or wise men went home another way, he decreed, what did he decree? To kill all the baby boys 2 years old and under. So that is what the Bible records. Now, why would Herod do 2 years old and under if the Magi, you see the nativity scene, you got the wise men right there. Well, baby Jesus is in his manger, and you got the shepherds and the wise men, and the wise men were not there when baby Jesus was born sitting in a manger. The wise men started on their journey, and so it would have taken them time to get there. And so they would have actually met baby Jesus in a house somewhere in Bethlehem because they were still there. But King Herod decreed, kill the babies 2 years old and under. So it could have been anywhere in that couple months to a 2-year time frame, because Herod was just covering his bases. But he went up to 2 years based on when the Magi told them they saw the star. So they had to keep going. So I don't know how long this trip took, but it was not short. This last year we drove to Disney World, and it took us 2 days to get there. It was an overnight trip. Now, it didn't take 2 full days, but it was still a long trip. We told the kids, like, all right, this is going to be a long trip. Don't even bother asking when are we going to get there. We weren't even out of St. Louis yet. I don't even know if we'd made it across the Mississippi River over into Illinois until one of the kids says, how much longer? This is taking forever. I was like, girl, this is going to be a long trip. We just had to keep going. The wise men just had to keep going. Courageous perseverance means you have to keep going. Think about your goals. Think about all the best things in your life. They did not come quickly. It took time. It took perseverance. You had to keep going. You cannot give up. There's a story of a gentleman years and years ago who bought into, he found a little bit of gold, and so he bought this property, and he bought mining equipment. He's mining, and he hits gold, and he's got gold, and all of a sudden it stops. And the vein of gold stops, and so he digs some more, and he digs some more, and he can't find it. And so he gives up. He sells off his equipment and sells off his land. And so this guy who has the gold, he has the idea like, hey, I'm going to go get somebody that knows what they're doing to assess this property and see what happens. And so they assess it, and they're like, oh, you just need to go a little bit to this direction and you'll hit the vein of gold again. And so he did. And it turns out it was only 3 feet from where the other guy had stopped. And it was the largest vein of gold that they had seen in that century. What if that first man who sold everything he had, borrowed money from his family to even get this equipment, what if he had just kept going 3 more feet? What would that have done for him and his family? You have got to keep going, my friend. Don't give up. Galaxy Quest, one of my favorite movies. Never give up. Never surrender. That is courageous perseverance. Lesson number 3, courageous perseverance listens to promptings and obeys, even if it can't see the big picture in the moment. Now, there's actually 2 things that I get from this when I look at the wise men. Okay. Number 1, they were prompted to bring 3 gifts. And those 3 gifts assisted in God's plan for Jesus. Verse 11 says, and after they came into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshipped him. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, each of these gifts represented part of Jesus' life and his deity. The gold represented kingship and the royalty of Christ, that he's the Son of God, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Frankincense. Now, frankincense, it's expensive today, but it was even more expensive then. And it represented worship and divinity. It was used in the priestly duties of worship. And that represents that Jesus is not just king, he's also priest in the order of, actually scripture talks about in the order of Melchizedek. He wasn't like the priests of Aaron, but he was a direct line to God. And what Jesus did is he removed the veil that kept us from not having a direct line with God. And Jesus made it so we could have that direct line with God. That's what the frankincense represents. That worship, that we can worship God in spirit and in truth and go directly to him. And there's no mediator between God and us anymore. And that's what Jesus did on the cross. Then you've got myrrh. Now, myrrh was also very expensive. And what's interesting is myrrh it represents anointing and embalming. So Jesus was the Christ, Messiah. Christ means Messiah, and that means the anointed one. It also, the embalming, when you think about it, it's Jesus. What did he come to earth to do in the first place? He didn't come just to live, but he also came to die. And so that myrrh was representing the embalming, that death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That creates that finished work for us. And also, when you think about these gifts, these treasures, they were most likely used by Joseph so they could fund Jesus' escape to Egypt that saved his life, and then Jesus was able to fulfill his purpose. So by the wise men, these magi, listening to the prompting to bring these gifts before the king, before Jesus, it helped assist the plan of God. When we listen to God's promptings, we are doing the same thing. We are partnering with God in his plan. Many times it could be you even partnering with God's plan for even somebody else when you're listening to a prompting. It always pays to listen and obey. The second thing that I learned is listening to the promptings and obey, even when they don't see the big picture. What happened to the magi, the wise men, after they worshiped Jesus? It says, and after they were warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the magi left for their own country by another way. They listened to God in a dream and then went another route. They listened to God's prompting and went home So they avoided Herod, which also gave Jesus a little extra time to escape before Herod realized he'd been bamboozled by the wise men. Because what would have happened if the wise men didn't listen to God? They went straight to Herod and said, "Hey, Herod, here's where Jesus is." Boom, and give him the exact location of baby Jesus where Herod could come and take him out. And he might have gotten there before Joseph was able to escape. What would have happened? It's a good question, isn't it? So the wise men were warned by God and they listened. Courageous perseverance. Where, my friend, has God been talking to you and you have not listened? Sometimes we can be sitting there going, "Man, I just haven't heard from God lately. It's like I'm talking to a blank wall." You know, the best way to hear God is to go back to the last thing he told you and ask yourself, did I do that thing? And if you haven't, just go do that thing. And I'll bet you, once you do that thing he already told you to do, he'll have his next step ready for you. But you cannot take your next step unless you've done the thing that God already told you to do. So you've got to listen and obey. Now, I just want to do a little recap here and wrap up this Hidden Heroes of Christmas series. You know, these are the lessons that we can take to give us a fresh start in 2025. Now, first, we journeyed with the shepherds and we learned courageous faith over fear. And what that taught us is we had to learn to choose to overcome fear, right? It's a choice. We got to take that choice. The second thing was this: we got to take immediate action. And the third was we need to boldly share what God's told us to share. And when we do that, it brings joy and expands faith along the way. That's what the shepherds did. They went and shared what the angels had told them about baby Jesus, and that blessed people. Next, Joseph reminds us about courageous trust. And courageous trust, remember, embraces uncertainty. We got a whole brand new year coming up, and it's uncertain. We don't know all what's going to work out, you know, and we don't know all the details. We don't know how it's all going to work politically here in the United States. We have a new president coming in. You know, there's rumors of all kinds of stuff, and we don't know how it's all going to work. But we know courageous trust will see us through because our trust is in our God. So Joseph taught us that he takes action when it matters most. That's what you got to do. Immediate action. Again, immediate action. Immediate action. That just keeps coming up. Joseph also taught us about courageous trust, that when we do that, we are safeguarding our purpose and what truly matters. Joseph safeguarded the purpose of God when he trusted God. Sorry, my dog is barking. And we're just going to keep moving on because that's the way we roll. Courageous trust also showed us that what we do, we are nurturing God's plan and purpose for our lives when we trust him. We're going to do those things that are necessary to trust him. And then finally, the wise men. The wise men show us courageous perseverance. Never give up, never surrender. They took immediate action. They pushed ahead despite the odds, how long the trip was, all the obstacles, caravanning, and they continued until they completed their journey. And they followed the divine promptings, teaching us to trust the journey. You know what? Even when we don't see the big picture, we are not always going to see the big picture. But it's worth the journey. All right, my friends, I want you to take some courageous action because remember, we've learned from all three action, right? Everybody took action. It takes action to be courageous in our faith, our trust, and our perseverance. So what I want you to do is I want you to identify your star, okay? Wise men follow the star. Identify your star. What is that goal that God really has for you in 2025. I actually did a podcast episode on that right before we started this series. So you can go back and listen to that if you need to. But I want you to focus on that one thing that, if it were true, would change everything about your business in 2025. Focus on that, okay? Maybe what you need to do is go back to the thing that God already told you and you might have given up, that you lost that perseverance, okay? But what is that one thing? And then I want you to this week start taking immediate action. Start taking steps towards fulfilling that today, to get back on that journey, to get back on the horse and keep moving forward. And then I want you to commit to consistency. It's the daily and weekly actions, staying on the path, persevering when the challenges come. Commit to consistency. And then don't forget to tune in to guidance. Listen to God. Spend those moments with Him in the day, asking Him for guidance, helping Him to redirect you where you need to be redirected, being open to being adaptable, ready to change course if needed, just like the wise men did. God has incredible things for you in this coming year. I want you to step boldly into 2025, or if you're listening to this later, whatever year you're stepping into, I want you to embrace this courageous act of faith, of trust, of perseverance, and allow them to guide your path so that you don't give up, that you never give up and you never surrender. Embrace this new year with that spirit of adventure, with wisdom, with knowing with these lessons, you have got a toolbox full of lessons that you can now use from our hidden heroes of Christmas. I want to thank you so much for traveling alongside me on this series and in this podcast. If you've listened for any length of time, or if you're new here, thank you so much for listening or for watching. I appreciate it. I just want to say, hey, here is to a shiny new year filled with confidence and courage. Because I want you to remember, my friend, you have got this, and Father's got you. Thank you again for listening. And until next time or next year, live fearlessly.